A personal assistant entered the wrong room and slept in her billionaire boss's bed, only for him to fall madly in love. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Emily Carter had always known that working for Alexander Hayes would be a challenge. He was cold, direct, and had a stare that could freeze even the hottest summer day. As his executive assistant, she handled his demands without flinching, but she also knew that a single mistake could cost her job. Now, here they were at an exclusive resort in California, where Alexander had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal with top investors in the tech industry. The hard work was done, and for once, even he seemed willing to relax. "Even you can relax today, Emily," he said, something she rarely heard from him. Seated at an upscale beachfront restaurant surrounded by other business elites, they toasted with expensive wine. The waiter barely had time to refill their glasses before Alexander emptied his. Emily had never seen her boss drink like this before. The man who was always in total control of everything was now laughing, making sarcastic remarks, and even complimenting the food. "Incredible. I never thought you had a soul, Mr. Hayes," Emily teased, swirling her wine in her glass. "And I never thought you knew how to relax, Miss Carter," Alexander shot back with a half-smile. Time passed too quickly, and before Emily realized it, dinner had turned into an informal contest of who could handle more glasses of wine. "You're drunk," Alexander commented, pointing his fork at her. "You're drunk," Emily shot back, pointing her butter knife at him. Alexander narrowed his eyes as if about to argue, but then shook his head and let out a quiet laugh. "I'm heading to my room," he announced, standing up. He was a bit unsteady, but still managed to walk away with his usual composed demeanor. Emily stayed a little longer, barely aware of her own state. The combination of expensive wine, the ocean breeze, and a work-free night had completely melted away her self-control. By the time she finally decided to leave, she could barely walk straight. "All right, just get to my room, take off my shoes, and sleep." Simple, she mumbled to herself, stumbling through the hallway. The problem? She had no idea where her room was. The numbers on the doors seemed to dance before her eyes. "What kind of font is this? Who designs numbers that keep moving?" she grumbled, squinting. Then she saw a door slightly open. "Wow, thank you, universe," she whispered to herself, stepping inside. She kicked off her shoes, tossed her bag somewhere random, and threw herself onto the soft bed as if diving into a cloud. "Best hotel ever," she murmured before passing out. The problem? That wasn't her room. The next morning, Alexander Hayes woke up feeling groggy. The night before had been a blur. Too much wine, too many investors to entertain. He ran a hand over his face, trying to shake off the drowsiness. Then he froze. Something moved beside him. His first thought, "This is a weird dream." His second, "My pillow is breathing." His third, "My pillow has hair." His eyes snapped open. Lying beside him, peacefully asleep, was Emily Carter. For a solid 5 seconds, he just stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Then she moved again, letting out a soft sigh, completely unaware of the catastrophe she had just created. Alexander exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down his face. "No way," he muttered under his breath. Emily rolled onto her side and lightly smacked his chest in her sleep, his bare chest. Alexander looked up at the ceiling, as if searching for some divine explanation. He knew he had drunk more than usual last night, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Emily Carter, his smart-mouthed, efficient, and painfully professional assistant, was in his bed. And she had no idea. She stirred, stretched lazily, let out a sleepy little sigh of contentment. "Best bed in the world," she murmured, still half asleep. Then she turned to the side, hugging the pillow, which, unfortunately, had muscles. Her brows furrowed. Something felt off. Slowly, she opened her eyes, blinking against the morning light. The first thing she saw was a well-built chest, rising and falling steadily. The second thing she saw was Alexander Hayes, wide-eyed, staring at her as if she had just committed a crime. Emily's brain froze. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. She screamed. She shot out of bed so fast that she got tangled in the sheets, tripped, and landed on the floor with a loud thump. "What are you doing in my room?" she shrieked, panic clear in her voice. Alexander let out a slow, exhausted sigh. "In your room?" he said, rubbing his temples. "Emily, this is my room." She blinked rapidly, her breath still uneven. "What?" She looked around. The curtains were different. The carpet was a different color. Then her eyes landed on the perfectly folded suit on a chair. Reality hit her like a truck. "Oh, no." Alexander crossed his arms. "Oh, yes." Emily covered her face with her hands, feeling her entire soul catch fire with embarrassment. "I walked into the wrong room." "Looks like it." "But I didn't do it on purpose," she exclaimed, feeling panic rising. "I figured, Emily. Otherwise, I would have already called security." She opened her mouth to argue, but quickly shut it. That made sense. Alexander gave her a critical look. "Answer me one thing." She swallowed. "What?" "Do you remember anything from last night?" A chill ran down Emily's spine. "Depends," she hedged. "What do you mean by anything?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. He seemed to still be processing the situation. "You woke up smiling," Emily froze. What?" "You were smiling, like someone who just had the best sleep of their life." Her face heated up instantly. "That doesn't mean anything," she blurted out. Alexander leaned back, smirking slightly. "I hope not." An awkward silence filled the room. Emily needed to get out of there. She scrambled to find her shoes, her hair a mess, her dignity nowhere to be found. "All right, this never happened. No one will ever know. And I'm leaving. Right now." "Great idea." Emily almost sighed in relief. Until a knock at the door. She froze on the spot. So did Alexander. "Mr. Hayes?" A woman's voice echoed from the other side. Emily turned pale. "That was a warning shot from the universe," she whispered. Alexander looked at her. "Hide." Emily's eyes widened. "Where?" "I don't know, just—" She frantically looked around. "Behind the couch?" "No. Too obvious." "In the closet?" "What if I get stuck?" Then, a last resort, under the bed. "Oh, this is a disaster," Emily muttered as she dove under the bed just as Alexander opened the door. The woman at the door? Natalie Parker, their company's PR manager. And Emily was trapped. Alexander Hayes stood in the doorway, his face composed, blocking the entrance just enough to prevent Natalie Parker from seeing inside. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," Natalie greeted him with her usual enthusiasm. "Sorry to bother you so early, but—" She paused, narrowing her eyes. "You look different." Alexander's grip on the door tightened slightly. "Different how?" Natalie tilted her head, studying him. "Like you didn't sleep well." Alexander kept his usual impassive expression. "It's just the lighting in the room," he said smoothly. Under the bed, Emily held her breath. Natalie blinked, unconvinced but deciding not to push. "Right. Well, I just came to let you know breakfast is ready." Alexander nodded. "Great. I'll be there soon." Natalie hesitated. Then, her next words made Emily's blood run cold. "One more thing. Have you seen Emily? She disappeared after dinner, and I thought she might be with you." Alexander didn't move. His expression didn't change. "No," he said. "I haven't seen Emily." Under the bed, Emily clapped a hand over her mouth. Natalie frowned, but eventually nodded. "Strange, but all right. See you at breakfast, Mr. Hayes." She turned and left. The moment the door clicked shut, Emily crawled out from under the bed, her hair still a mess, her face pure panic. That was a nightmare. Alexander sighed in agreement, running a hand through his hair. Emily grabbed her shoes and bag. Okay, I'm going to my room, forgetting all of this, and moving on with my life like nothing ever happened. Alexander crossed his arms. Probably the best decision. Emily nodded. Great, so I'm leaving. She turned on her heel, ready to flee when... Emily. She stopped. Yes? There was a brief pause. Then, in an overly casual tone, Alexander said, If you plan on walking into the wrong room again tonight, at least knock first. Emily turned to him, shocked. Are you joking about this? Alexander tilted his head slightly. Maybe. She squinted at him. I am never drinking around you again. And with that, she stormed out, determined to erase the memory of last night. But deep down, Emily knew this was something she would never forget. Emily power-walked through the resort hallways like she was fleeing a crime scene. If anyone saw her at that moment, they'd probably think she had just committed a felony. What a disaster, she muttered under her breath, gripping her room key tightly. Right now, she had two goals. Get to her room without anyone noticing. Pretend last night never happened. Simple, straightforward, reasonable. But the moment she turned the corner into the main hallway, she slammed right into Natalie. Emily! Natalie gasped, eyes wide. Emily forced a smile. She failed miserably. Hi, Natalie. Natalie narrowed her eyes. Where were you last night? Emily froze. Her brain scrambled to come up with an answer, but her mouth acted faster. I slept. Natalie gave her a long look. Really? Emily nodded quickly. Because your hair is a mess, your clothes are wrinkled, and you look like you just saw a ghost. Emily let out an awkward laugh. Yeah, rough night of sleep. Natalie crossed her arms. I'm almost certain you were with Alexander. Emily's heart stopped. What? Why would you think that? Because I went to his room a few minutes ago, and he seemed off too. A cold sweat ran down Emily's spine. Off how? Natalie studied her. Like someone trying to hide something. Emily swallowed hard. Well, maybe he just slept badly too. Natalie narrowed her eyes even more. Emily, you're not hiding anything, are you? Of course not. Are you sure? Yes, Natalie squinted. Then why are you yelling? Emily frowned. I'm hungry. That makes me irritable. Natalie finally backed off. Oh, that makes sense. Emily almost collapsed in relief. All right then, can we have breakfast now? Natalie grabbed Emily's arm and dragged her down the hallway. And you're going to tell me all about this rough night of sleep. Emily could only force a smile and pretend everything was under control. But she knew the truth. Nothing was under control. The breakfast hall was filled with the scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries. Normally, Emily would have enjoyed the moment, but she was too busy avoiding eye contact with Alexander Hayes. He was sitting a few tables ahead, talking to two investors. As usual, he looked flawless. No sign that he had woken up hours ago with his assistant lying beside him. Natalie, meanwhile, kept sneaking glances at Emily. You're staring at Alexander weirdly, she commented. Emily almost choked on her coffee. I am not staring. You are. I'm not. Then why is your hand shaking while holding your cup? Emily immediately put the cup down. I'm just tense about today's meetings. Natalie nodded, accepting the excuse. But Emily knew at any moment everything could fall apart. After breakfast, everyone headed to the resort's large conference room. Today was an important event, the final negotiations before the company merger. Emily tried to focus, but every time she glanced up, her eyes met Alexander's. And to her total frustration, he looked amused. Every few minutes, he'd glance at her and slightly tilt his head, as if saying, Still thinking about it, aren't you? Emily wanted to sink into the floor. Halfway through the meeting, Alexander spoke to her directly. Emily, could you review these reports for me? His tone was serious, professional, but there was a slight gleam in his eyes, like he was enjoying this way too much. Emily tightened her grip on her pen. Yes, Mr. Hayes. He gave her a barely noticeable smile, and at that moment, Emily knew. He wasn't going to let her forget this anytime soon. When the meeting finally ended, Emily tried to slip away unnoticed, but before she could reach the door, Miss Carter. She froze. Slowly, she turned around. Alexander stood there, hands in his pockets. Join me for a moment. Emily hesitated. Natalie whispered as she passed. Tell me what that was about later. Emily forced a smile, then followed Alexander into a private room. He shut the door, turned to face her, and said, We need to talk. Emily crossed her arms the moment Alexander shut the door behind them. She could still hear the muffled voices of investors and executives lingering outside, but in this private room, it was just the two of them. What exactly do we need to talk about? She asked, trying to sound indifferent. Alexander studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes unreadable. This morning, he said simply. Emily forced a dry laugh. Oh, you mean the part where I walked into the wrong room, slept in my boss's bed, and then had to hide under it like some kind of criminal? Yeah, let's definitely relive that experience. A ghost of a smirk played on Alexander's lips. You forgot the part where you woke up smiling. Emily's face burned. That was about the bed, not you. Of course, he nodded, his voice dripping with amusement. It was an excellent bed. She clenched her jaw, determined not to let him get under her skin. If you dragged me in here just to tease me, I'd like to remind you that I have work to do. His smirk faded. Actually, I dragged you in here because we have a problem. Something in his tone made her straighten. What kind of problem? Alexander exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Someone saw you leaving my room this morning. Emily's stomach dropped. Who? Does it matter? He countered. What matters is that the investors are now under the impression that we spent the night together. And surprisingly, he tilted his head. It's working in our favor. Emily blinked. What? Alexander leaned against the desk, arms crossed, watching her reaction. The Callahans, the investors we've been trying to win over for months, value stability and trust in their business partners. Now that they think we're involved, they see me as more grounded. Emily let out a sharp laugh. So you're telling me they think you're more trustworthy because of me? Something like that. She crossed her arms tighter. And what exactly do you want me to do about it? Alexander's smirk returned, but this time there was something calculated about it. Simple, he said. For the rest of this trip, we keep up the illusion. Emily's eyes widened. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? For 3 days. Are you out of your mind? She whispered, glancing at the door as if someone might overhear. Alexander shrugged. It's not the worst idea. It's insane, she threw up her hands. You want me to play along with a rumor that could, I don't know, completely ruin my career? It won't, he said smoothly. I'll make sure of that. Emily scoffed. Oh, well, as long as you say so, then obviously I should just... Wait, no. This is still insane. Alexander stepped closer, his expression turning serious. Think about it, Emily. You know how important this deal is. If playing along with a harmless assumption helps secure it, isn't it worth it? She hated how reasonable that sounded. She also hated how part of her was curious. Emily swallowed. So, let me get this straight. You want us to act like we're together in front of these investors for the next 3 days? And then what? We just go back to normal. Exactly. And no one will ever know the truth? Not unless you tell them. She hesitated, her mind racing. This was dangerous, ridiculous. But at the same time, if it helped land the deal, was it really so bad? And if I say no? She asked. Alexander lifted a brow. Then we go back out there, the Callahans get suspicious, and the deal falls apart. Emily narrowed her eyes. That sounds like a threat. He smirked. Number, just a reminder. She took a deep breath. Do you want something from me? Alexander studied her for a long moment before finally replying, just cooperation. Emily exhaled sharply, hating that he was making sense. Fine, she muttered. But this ends the moment we get back home. Of course, his smirk deepened. Then it's settled. She clenched her fists. I hate you. Noted. Emily groaned, spinning on her heel to leave before she could change her mind. Alexander called after her. Don't forget, tonight's cocktail event is our first test. She didn't respond. She was already regretting everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, adjusting her dress. It was a sleek, navy blue number, elegant, but not too flashy. She didn't want to look like she was trying to impress anyone, which was ridiculous, because this was pretend. Still, as she stepped into the hallway and saw Alexander waiting for her, she felt her stomach tighten. He was dressed in a dark suit, as impeccable as always, watching her with that unreadable gaze. You clean up well, he said. Emily rolled her eyes. Let's just get this over with. He offered his arm. She hesitated. Then with a sigh, she took it. As they entered the cocktail lounge, Emily felt the weight of every single set of eyes on them. The Callahans were already there. The moment they spotted Alexander and Emily together, Charles Callahan smiled. Alexander, he greeted, and Miss Carter, what a pleasant surprise to see you two together. Emily felt her pulse spike, but before she could react, Alexander casually and deliberately slid his arm around her waist. Yes, he said smoothly, we thought it was time to stop keeping things quiet. Emily almost choked on air. Charles chuckled. Well, I must say, this only strengthens our confidence in the partnership. Emily forced a smile, barely keeping up with the insanity of this situation. Alexander, meanwhile, was completely in control. Shall we get a drink? He murmured to her. Emily nodded stiffly, letting him lead her across the room. Once they were far enough away from the crowd, she turned to him, eyes blazing. How do you make this look so easy? She hissed. Alexander tilted his head. The trick is not to overthink it, she scoffed. Easy for you to say. You're not the one pretending to like someone who treats you like an office assistant instead of a human being. He leaned in slightly. I never said I didn't like you, Emily. She blinked. Before she could react, they were interrupted by a group of investors. For the next hour, Emily smiled, laughed, and played her role. And to her absolute horror, it wasn't as hard as she expected. But then, something unexpected happened. As they spoke to an investor couple, Alexander brushed his hand over hers. A subtle touch, almost insignificant. But it made her breath hitch. Her eyes met his. And for a split second, she wondered, was this really just pretend? Emily couldn't shake the feeling that settled in her ever since Alexander touched her hand. It was such a small gesture, barely noticeable to anyone else. But to her, it felt like the moment everything started to shift. This was supposed to be a game, a performance, a strategy to secure a deal. Then why did it suddenly feel real? The cocktail party dragged on, filled with small talk, glasses of wine, and business discussions. Emily played her role well, smiling at the right moments, nodding whenever Alexander spoke, pretending she was completely at ease. But deep down, she was anything but. Emily, Charles Callahan's wife Diane, said with a warm smile, I must say it's inspiring to see how well you and Alexander work together. Such a strong team, both professionally and personally. Emily hesitated for only a second before returning the smile. Thank you. We've always had great synergy. Diane chuckled. Oh, it's obvious. You complement each other so well. Emily forced herself not to react. Instead, she felt it, the light pressure of Alexander's hand on the small of her back. A touch so subtle that only she noticed. Her heart raced. He was making this look too real. And worse, he wasn't struggling at all. As soon as the conversation ended, Emily leaned in slightly, keeping her voice low. "What are you doing?" Alexander took a sip of his drink, glancing at her with feigned innocence. "What do you mean?" "You're overdoing it," she whispered, trying to ignore the warmth still lingering from where his hand had rested. "I don't see it that way," he murmured. Emily clenched her jaw. "This is a business arrangement, Alexander, not a game." He smirked, tilting his head. "Then stop acting like you're affected." A shiver ran down her spine. He knew. He knew exactly what he was doing to her. Emily refused to give him the satisfaction. She straightened, brushing off her nerves. If Alexander Hayes wanted to play, then fine. She'd play too. For the rest of the evening, she subtly started to push back. She laughed a little too sweetly at his jokes. She leaned in just a fraction closer when they spoke. At one point, while they were seated at a table with investors, she let her leg brush against his under the table. It was a move so innocent that no one else noticed. But he did. He barely faltered, just a second's hesitation as he lifted his fork. But Emily caught it. Good. She was learning his game. And to her absolute shock, he seemed to be enjoying it. By the time the investors were completely convinced. The Callahans seemed thrilled. And Emily? She had never felt more exhausted. She was about to slip away and retreat to her room when... Emily! She stopped mid-step. Slowly, she turned around. Alexander stood near the exit, hands in his pockets, watching her. "Come with me," he said. She hesitated, but in the end, she followed. He led her out onto the resort's terrace, overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed softly against the shore, the air thick with the scent of salt and night-blooming flowers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "Are we taking this too far?" Emily finally asked, arms crossed. Alexander didn't immediately answer. Instead, he turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" She exhaled sharply. "I mean this." She gestured between them. "This whole act, it's getting... blurry." His lips quirked. "Blurry how?" Emily frowned, frustrated. "You know exactly how..." Alexander studied her, tilting his head slightly. "Are you asking if this is still just pretend?" She swallowed. "Isn't it?" There was a pause. Then, quietly, he said, "Do you want it to be?" The breath caught in her throat. That was the moment she knew. This wasn't just about the deal anymore. Alexander took a step closer, his voice dropping lower. "If you tell me none of this meant anything to you, I'll let it go." Emily's heart pounded. Because she could lie. She could say this was just a game. That none of it mattered. That she didn't care when he touched her, or looked at her, or leaned in just a little too close. But she didn't. She couldn't. She wanted this. And she hated that she did. Her voice faltered. Alexander's gaze never wavered. Then, in a voice softer than she had ever heard from him, he murmured, "Emily." Her breath shook. And before she could second-guess herself, he kissed her. It was slow at first, hesitant, like he was testing the waters, like he was giving her a choice. But Emily didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her fingers curling around his jacket, holding him in place. The kiss deepened, turning warmer, more sure. And in that moment, the game was officially over. This was real. When they finally broke apart, Emily's lips were slightly parted, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Alexander's forehead rested against hers, his hands still holding her waist. "You know what this means, right?" he murmured. She did, and for the first time, she didn't want to run. "Yeah," she whispered. A slow smile spread across his lips. Good. They walked back to the hotel in silence. Not because things were awkward, but because they were both processing. When they reached Emily's room, she hesitated in the doorway. Alexander watched her, his expression unreadable. Are you going to pretend that didn't happen? He asked. She let out a breathy laugh. I don't think I could if I tried. His lips quirked. Good. Emily bit her lip, glancing at her room, then back at him. There was a choice to be made, and for once she wasn't afraid to make it. Do you want to come in? She asked. Alexander's eyes darkened slightly. Do you want me to? She swallowed. Yeah. That was all it took. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind them, and Emily knew there was no turning back. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling different. For the first time in years, she wasn't immediately thinking about work or emails or Alexander's impossible schedule. Instead, her mind was occupied with him, the way he had kissed her last night, the way his hands had moved over her skin like he had wanted this for a long time. And the most terrifying part? She had wanted it too. As the early morning light filtered through the hotel curtains, she turned slightly, expecting to see him beside her. But the bed was empty, her stomach dropped. For a moment, she lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that this was fine, that last night didn't change anything, that she wasn't feeling a pang of disappointment that he had left without saying anything. Then, the smell of coffee. Emily sat up abruptly. A moment later, the hotel room door opened and Alexander stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee, his suit jacket draped over his arm. He paused when he saw her awake. You're up, he said. Emily stared at him. You left. His brow lifted slightly. I went to get coffee. He held up the cup. I figured you might need one. Emily blinked. She didn't know what she had expected, but it wasn't this. She took the coffee, her fingers brushing against his for a split second longer than necessary. Thanks, she murmured. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, watching her with that calm, unreadable gaze of his. Emily hated that it made her heart race. So, he said after a moment, what happens now? She froze. That was the question, wasn't it? What did happen now? The deal with the Callahans was practically sealed. They were flying back to New York in a few hours. In theory, this was where the act ended, where they shook hands, said good job, and went back to their professional, distant lives. Except, it wasn't an act anymore, and they both knew it. Emily exhaled slowly. I don't know, she admitted. Alexander tilted his head slightly, studying her. Do you regret it? Her chest tightened. No, she said before she could even think about it. His lips curved slightly. Good. Emily swallowed. Do you? Alexander didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch so deliberate it sent a shiver down her spine. I don't regret a single second, he murmured. And that was the moment she realized she was completely screwed. The flight back to New York was quiet, not in a tense way, just contemplative. Alexander had his laptop open, answering emails like nothing in his world had shifted. Emily, meanwhile, sat beside him, staring at the clouds outside the plane window, wondering what the hell she was supposed to do now. They had crossed a line, and yet neither of them had talked about it. She almost asked. But every time she opened her mouth, she caught Alexander watching her out of the corner of her eye. Not in an uncomfortable way, not in a regretful way, just watching, as if he was waiting for her to figure something out. By the time they landed, Emily was more confused than ever, and things only got worse when they arrived back at the company headquarters. Because the moment they walked through the glass doors, Alexander's entire demeanor changed. The man who had kissed her senseless, The man who had brought her coffee in bed. The man who had looked at her like she was something more. Gone. In his place was CEO Alexander Hayes, calm, composed, untouchable. "Miss Carter," he said smoothly as they stepped into the elevator, "schedule a debriefing meeting with the Callahans for later this week." Emily stared at him. Just like that? Like nothing had happened? Like he hadn't had his hands all over her less than 24 hours ago? She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay professional. "Of course, Mr. Hayes." His expression didn't change. But something about the way he stood, the tension in his shoulders, the way he didn't meet her eyes, it was all she needed to know. He was running, just like she had planned to before. And for some reason, that pissed her off. For the next 3 days, Alexander acted like nothing had happened. Emily played along. At first it was fine. She could pretend just as well as he could. She could answer emails, organize meetings, handle his impossible schedule, all without acknowledging the fact that they had spent an entire night tangled up in each other. But then came the stolen glances, the accidental touches in the office hallway, the charged silence every time they were in the same room. Emily hated it. More than that, she hated that she cared. So on Friday evening, after everyone else had gone home, she finally snapped. She stormed into his office, slamming the door shut behind her. Alexander looked up from his desk, unfazed. "Miss Carter?" "Oh, cut the Miss Carter crap, Alexander." He leaned back in his chair, arching a brow. "Something on your mind?" Emily folded her arms. "You tell me. You've been avoiding me all week." "I've been working." "Bullshit," he smirked. "Language," she glared. "Are you seriously going to pretend nothing happened between us?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I wasn't pretending." Emily's breath caught. Alexander stood, slowly closing the space between them. "But I was waiting," he said. She frowned. "For what?" "For you to stop running." Emily opened her mouth, then closed it, because she couldn't deny it. She had been running. She had spent so much time convincing herself that this was a bad idea, that it was dangerous, that they couldn't possibly be anything more than boss and assistant. But the truth was, she had already fallen. Emily exhaled shakily. "This is a terrible idea. Probably. We work together. Yes. This could end horribly. Could." She searched his face for any hesitation. She found none. Only patience. Only certainty. Only him. Emily swallowed. "And if I say I don't want to pretend anymore?" Alexander smiled. "Then I'd say it's about time." And then he kissed her. This time, there was no hesitation, no confusion, no pretending, just them. And for the first time since this whole mess started, Emily didn't feel lost. She felt home. Let us know in the comments, what do you think of Emily and Alexander's story? Rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories, and click on the end screen for more drama-filled romance.